So we come now in our study of King Lear for the AQA English Literature A Level Paper 1 Tragedy Paper to Act 4, Scene 7. Now we're going to look at a section of that scene which was actually on the exam back in 2019, and it's lines 41 to 84. So locating the scene, it comes at the end of this act. We've seen the main characters all sort of cascading downwards into a spiral of defeat and despair. Gloucester and Lear we've just seen together in the previous scene, Gloucester blind and Lear mad. So the tragedy has unfolded and the worst things that could have happened really. But along the way there's been this kind of education for both the main characters, Gloucester and Lear, as they have to sort of realise that they have to sort of see beyond themselves and think more deeply about the needs and wishes of others, and that's certainly been the consistent sort of theme in the background of the play too. And that comes to a head here. We've had a little hint through, even as early as Act 2, we hear that there's news that Cordelia is taking action to support Lear, and then it's hinted again in Act 3, and it's one reason why Gloucester is seen as being a traitor, because he supports Lear in trying to reconnect with Cordelia. And then in Act 4 we've seen Cordelia for the first time since the first scene. In the middle of Act 4, in Act 4 Scene 4, she talks to a doctor and talks about the fact that she knows that her father is ill, mentally ill, and what help can she offer him. And eventually we see that he has been caught up with and he's been brought back to Cordelia, and he's had a sleep, and this sleep they're hoping might be enough to sort of bring him back to his senses. And so this is the reconciliation scene, a very touching, moving scene in which Cordelia shows her great loyalty and love for her father despite the fact that he has abused her. He's been a horrible, selfish, unpleasant father to her, and yet she stayed incredibly loyal, and it's really touching that all she wants to do is help him. So there must have been, prior to our views, prior to that first scene, there must have been great love between them, and that great love outlasts the mistakes that Lear has made. So this scene itself, how it should be performed, should be a scene of great touching gentleness and spirit and slightly ethereal strangeness. Music is played to try and soothe him, and that has to be, I think, quite heavenly, because at times in the scene he seems to think he is in heaven, he's died, or perhaps in hell looking up at heaven. So a really touching, moving scene, quite a different kind of scene from any of the other scenes we've seen in the play, where it's been all violence and horror and misery, and this is kind of a hopeful scene. It's one little moment of hope prior to the battle sequence that follows, and of course that doesn't go very well, so tragedies can't end well. But you can see with the loving moment here why perhaps famously in the 18th century the play was rewritten to have a happy ending, because this is such a lovely, touching moment. Can't we rest at this, and can't we come back to this at the very end of the play? Let's have a little look at the actual scene then. So we've had King Lear sort of in Act 4 Scene 6 running away from the people who tried to support him, and here we are in what's called the French camp, although it's in Britain, and Cordelia and Kent and the doctor are there, and they discuss at the start of the scene what might be done to help, whether Lear can be helped or not. And there's great concern and worry from Cordelia, and as I say, music is played at the beginning of the scene, and just after that is where our section begins, with line 44. The doctor sort of prompts Cordelia to speak. "Madam, do you, 'tis fittest." And she says, "How does my royal lord? How fares your majesty?" And that's where we begin our sequence. As I say, Lear is just waking up here. He's just in a sort of blurred, confused state. And that has to be very carefully portrayed. It's a very different kind of Lear from the angry, bitter, passionate Lear we've seen in every other scene, really. Here's this sort of gentle old man who's kind of acknowledging his immortality and his foolishness. He's also still a bit confused, and for a while Cordelia's quite upset, thinking, well, nothing's changed. He's still quite mad, really. But again, notice the gentleness, the questioning, the sympathy, the how, words, very open questions, just all love and sympathy from Cordelia. Lear's response, you do me wrong to take me out of the grave. Thou art a soul in bliss, but I am bound upon a wheel of fire. Mine own tears do scald like molten lead. The wheel of fire, so the wheel of fortune was earlier, now it's a wheel of fire. He feels like he's been tortured in hell. He feels like he's been through something. And he must be looking up from hell at the angels in heaven, is kind of what he seems to be imagining. It's a powerful and touching image, and a shocking and scary image too. I'm bound upon a wheel of fire. He's in a torment of torture throughout the play, really, certainly after the first scene. Do you know me, she says. You are a spirit. I know. When did you die? So this seems like his instinctive reaction to her beauty and her gentleness, that you must be in some sort of spiritual force. Cordelia, still far wide, sort of her upset, she doesn't speak full sentences there, because she's moved by this and thinks, oh no, he can't see the reality, he can't talk about things that are real, he can only talk in riddles and strange illusions. I like the Doctor's role. He's only in it for a couple of scenes, but he plays a role that we would want from a Doctor, very caring and sympathetic and knowledgeable. He's scarce awake, let him alone a while, give him a chance, maybe he will come around. He's only just woken up. And then we get this great speech of bewilderment. Now, there's been other moments of bewilderment in the play, but this is very honest. If you remember, who is it that can tell me who I am, was one of Lear's joking comments he made in Act 1 when he was being facetious and trying to mock Goneril for not behaving like his daughter. I can't be Lear because you're not talking to me as if I am. But here, genuine questions, genuine bewilderment, a bit more like how Gloucester was in the previous scene, where he was genuinely confused and bewildered. And he says, where am I? What's going on? I don't understand. Is this daylight? And then I should even die with pity to see another thus. So this kind of self-awareness, maybe sort of commentary, being able to step out of yourself and look at yourself, perhaps self-obsession still, but a slightly different way of looking at the world than we'd seen earlier. And that idea of seeing another thus would make me die of pity. So that sympathy for others is the driving force to that image, and that's a very unusual thing in King Lear. He hasn't shown that at the beginning of the play at all, and it started to happen in Act 3, and then it got a bit lost amongst a bit of craziness in Act 4, but here it is again, that to see someone else like this would make me die of pity. Would I were assured of my condition. So this gentle repetition of, I don't really know what's happening. Now, Cordelia has so few lines. She's got to make the most of these. We've got to see her for what she is. The danger is that she could be seen as being kind of too good to be true, and a rather sort of saccharine character, a sweet, sugary substitute for sugar, and therefore not very appealing, not very emotionally moving, really, because you just see her as just too good, too unrealistically good, and therefore no reality to that, can't believe in it, and it becomes, instead of emotions, what we call sentimentality, which is kind of forced emotion that we don't really feel is earned by the action in front of us. So how can we think of Cordelia as a good person if we hardly know her? But we have to get everything from these lines. Look upon me, sir. Hold your hands in benediction over me. No, sir, you must not kneel. So he kneels to her, which so visually that's absolutely a stunning reversal from that early part of the play. That has to be borne in mind when a performance performs Act 1, Scene 1, where he's standing over her, presumably, and shouting at her. Now he kneels to her, but she doesn't want to, so she will bend, probably kneel herself. The visuals there are all really, remember, there's still this sort of ethereal music behind playing, no doubt, and this is conveying this sense of a just sort of almost mystical reunion. And then we get this lovely speech from Lear. Pray do not mock me, I'm a very foolish, fond old man. Bit of alliteration there to highlight he admits he's a fool. That word, the fool, of course, takes us back to his own fool. He's called Jester, who's disappeared from the play and is a loss. Fourscore and upwards means upward of 80 years old, which is often seen by actors playing the role as being a rather challenging fact. He's actually got to be 80. Can you imagine an 80-year-old actor playing him? Well, it has been tried. Ian McKellen played the role when he was 80, but it's a very challenging role for an old actor. And to deal playing the I fear I'm not in my perfect mind, there is that sort of sense of self-awareness that and quiet reflection. There's no imagery here, is there? There's not a load of mentions of birds and animals and soldiers that we saw in Act 4, for instance, and so the plainer language, the plainer costumes as well. I think he's often placed into a sort of white robe at this point. There's a sense of everything being minimal, and the chaos of the play recedes. This is the calm after the storm, finally. I'm doubtful for mainly what place this is, and all the skill I have, remember not these garments. I don't know where I did lodge last night. So he accepts that he just doesn't really get how he's got to this point, but that's because he was in such a bewildered state through the last few nights. But then he says, I think this lady to be my child, Cordelia. And you can, obviously, she has to be incredibly emotional with these few words she gets, and so I am. She's so pleased that he recognises her. And she's so open and willing to forgive him. It doesn't even cross her mind not to forgive him. She's just so pleased to be back there with him. And he's very humble and admitting, yes, I've made terrible mistakes. I'm a wreck. I'm a failure of a human being. But here I am. And I do recognise you. And then, of course, he says, be your tears wet. She's crying, in case we didn't know it. But weep not. If you have poison for me, I'll drink it. So he just immediately, perhaps it's melodramatic, perhaps it's him still putting on a show, but usually it's seen no more as just genuinely, you must hate me. I understand you hate me. I've not done anything good for you. I've really let you down. I'm really sorry, but I'll do it. I'll take the poison. I'll take the punishment. You tell me what I must do to make it up. I know you do not love me. For your sisters have, as I do remember, done me wrong. You have some cause, they have not. So, judging by the way Cordelia ought to treat him, he thinks, well, yeah, of course she's going to do terrible things to me. Because look what the other girls did. Look what Regan and Goneril did, and they didn't have any reason. He'd done nothing to harm them. So, again, very humble. We might say he goes from one extreme to another, and that's part of his problem, and we might not admire that so much, but I think, most productions take it as genuinely a moment of humility and love and compassion and a changed Lear who's open to admit his faults. And Cordelia, again, with the few words she gets, no cause. She can't speak because she's crying so much. I think it has to be the idea there, that she really can't say anything. She just wants to hug him and love him and forgive him and welcome him back and be so relieved that he's alive and seemingly somewhat healthy. Another question, am I in France? In your own kingdom, Sir Kent chips in, which is typical Kent, isn't he? Wants to just say, you're still king. Of course, he really knows that he's not. Do not abuse me. Don't kick me. I know I'm king anymore. I can't be king in anything but name now. Barely that. So the doctor says, be comforted. The great range you see is killed in him. The danger to make him even over the time he's lost. So the idea of let's just try and move forward from where we are, which is a general feeling at the very end of the play too. Trouble him no more. Don't sort of ask too many questions. And again, will it please your highness what? She's so respectful and calls him highness. And that phrase, you must bear with me, put up with me. I'm sorry, You're going to have to put up with me now. You're going to have to help me to walk into somewhere more secure. Pray you now, forget and forgive. Forget and forgive. Forget and forgive. Just put it past us. The past is past. Can we forgive? Cordelia can. Cordelia is such a noble character that it doesn't enter her head that she shouldn't forgive him. But most audiences are not as forgiving of Lear as that. Most audiences are a bit sort of puzzled by Cordelia's ease with which she doesn't even speak one word against how he treated her. But that's her nobility. That's what she stands for, is just this absolute, like Kent, who's also there, and the Doctor in some ways too, just absolutely dutifully doing what she knows is right in her heart. I'm old and foolish is the final lines in this little sequence, the final words, and of course that summarises this humility that we now see. This is the thing that the fool was trying to say to him, that Kent was trying to say to him. Just be who you are, an old man, accepting your position in society and in your relationships. You're old. Behave like you're old. And now he does. So here at the kind of climax of the play, there's a final moment almost here that, this is a kind of ending, but it isn't the ending, unfortunately. There's a whole other act to go, and we know it can't be the ending because we know there's this war, this battle in prospect, so it's not the end. But it certainly is a moment of hope, a moment of radiance, the one glimmer of radiance and hope in this bleak play. Does it do enough to prepare us for the very end of the play and make us think there's hope there, that the remaining characters, Albany and Edgar, can move things forward, as society can grow and blossom out of the wreck of what the other characters have left behind? I'm not sure, and I'm not sure Shakespeare's sure either, but he gives us this moment. He allows us this moment of great, radiant forgiveness, and we should all be so lucky to have, that kind of loving, forgiving companion or family member who will be there beside you in spite of all the stupid things you do. They will stand by you and save you in the moment when you need most saving. And yeah, that does emotionally hit home, I think. And I think if Cordelia plays with those few words she's got in the right way, it does give us a sort of understanding of who she is. She just cares for and loves her father, which is only natural.